Hey, David Brewster here with an episode of Brewster's Millions of Rants, and this is Guitar Player, and it was announced earlier this week that Guitar Player magazine will cease, the print production of their magazine at the end of this year. So the December 2024 issue will be the final, printed Guitar Player magazine. This is huge news, whether you're a reader of the magazine, a guitarist, an educator, a writer, whatever. Guitar Player was essential, and they were the first. They were the first guitar magazine on planet Earth, and their flow and layout and the form of the magazine, all other guitar magazines kind of followed their ideas and their layout. The interviews, the lessons, the ads, Guitar Player was first. And they started, late 1967, like a fall winter, issue. And then the next thing you knew, it just exploded. And they helped inform the world, long before the internet, of tips and techniques and these kind of behind the scenes secrets from the players they interviewed, the writers for the magazine, definitely essential. And I'm definitely honored that I wrote for Guitar Player magazine for over 5 years. I was a lessons contributor. I also wrote 2 feature articles about Sweetwater's Gear Fest for Guitar Player magazine. So I'm definitely honored, that achievement. And there's just, something that kind of hit me in the gut when it was announced. And it was like, wait, Guitar Player is leaving? So basically this episode is going to be a celebration of Guitar Player magazine. I'm going to share a few things near the end that I contributed to the magazine, some licks, and we're going to talk about the magazine itself. So if you're a fan of Guitar Player magazine, this rant video is totally for you. So the first thing I want to talk about here is just the history of the magazine. There's so much important history surrounding Guitar Player magazine, especially the original incarnations. The original run, the late 60s through the 70s, and then it kind of morphed and changed in the 80s, and then it morphed and changed in the 90s and the 2000s and so on. So about every 10 years, the magazine did kind of change, whether it's the font, for their logo or the layout of the magazine. The lessons section noticeably changed over the years. So depending on what, era of the magazine you're familiar with or what age, you happen to be, you might be, more familiar with the more recent, issues, or if you're older, you might be more familiar with some of the older issues. But definitely, like I said, about every 10 years or so, the magazine would kind of reinvent itself or change. And my favorite period is like the late 70s all the way until about the early 90s. And no offense to what came before or after that, but that's my personal favorite time period, right? And, in my opinion, like if you want to know if you're reading a good, issue of Guitar Player magazine, if Tommy Tedesco's in the magazine, then that's the right period. That's the period I'm talking about. Tommy Tedesco, maybe Howard Roberts, Rick Emmett, and some of those, contributors as far as the lessons. But if Tommy Tedesco's in your Guitar Player magazine, then that's probably a good issue. And then later, like in the 90s, if Paul Gilbert, Jennifer Batten, Frank Gambale, and some of those players pop up in the lessons, then that's probably a good issue too. No offense, like I said, to what came before or after. I'm also dissing myself there because I came after the 90s, editions or the version of the magazine. So I'm not dissing myself or other people, but just me personally, I'm just being honest. That's my favorite period, late 70s to early 90s. And, part of that period's, claim to fame was their advisory board. And they had famous, very famous guitarists that they could call up or contact with questions, or if they needed like a little nugget of information, they would contact one of their advisory board members. So I basically looked it up. This is from the summer of 1987, issue. I think it was July. But check out the advisory board that Guitar Player had in 1987 in the summer. So last year I created a rant video called the Guitar Player Basic Library, and I was focusing on Guitar Player's books that they've released over the years. And here's my stack right here. So I did create a rant video talking about these, so I don't want to spend very much time talking about these again. But definitely these top 2 right here, as far as the history of the magazine, behind the scenes and actually in the magazine itself, these 2 are great. So if you're a fan of Guitar Player, maybe you've heard this announcement about them ending, print production, and maybe you want to grab, some history from the magazine, these 2 books are essential. You have to grab these. There's lessons, there's reprints of interviews, there's tons of, covers and photos and stuff. Great books. And then these are the classic like GPI, titles. A lot of these are reprints, from the magazine and additional materials they kind of crammed in. And I did pick up the Guitar Player Repair Guide, that was earlier this year. And then the other books I believe I featured in the Guitar Player Basic Library Rant video. And if you'd like to watch that video, here's the image that goes with that video. Just scroll around and search on my channel until you find this. So I did post about this on Facebook, and I haven't mentioned it here on YouTube too. But last month I basically scored over 200 vintage guitar player magazines, and over the last 4 or 5 years I've been slowly kind of collecting and hoarding some of these classic magazines. And I've posted and kind of shared a little bit here and there on Facebook, but I wanted to share this in this episode because I was literally just building my library, and then this announcement about them ceasing print production and everything, I thought, oh man, I'm so glad I grabbed these, because I can definitely guarantee the value of these magazines is going to skyrocket. Now with this announcement, I did look on eBay. There were some bundles and some lots of Guitar Player. There was one that was like $35,000 or something. Of course, I think it was a complete Guitar Player collection. But anyway, I wanted to basically share some of my treasures that I've kind of unearthed here, buying these old guitar players. I don't have the first issue, but I am happy to report I have issue number 4. That's from 1968. That is so cool. But I bought these sleeves from a comic book store to kind of protect these magazines. Here's another old issue. That's from 1970. Here's Dickie Betts. That's 1972. So the old issues I'm definitely happy to have. I've got a few other old ones. But then Van Halen is over here beside me. I love the fact I found that issue and I framed it. Here's Alan Halsworth, a double shot of Alan. I had to put those in the sleeves to protect them. This one's huge, the Randy Rhoads tribute issue. I love the fact I have a copy of that. I had to put that in a protective sleeve. And the condition, look at that. The condition of that issue, I mean, that's in great shape. It looks brand new. Let's see. Technically, the first issue of Guitar Player magazine I ever saw was this one. I never owned it. I own it now. But my first guitar instructor, Jody Davis from the Newsboys, I talked about Jody before. This was laying on Jody's bed in his bedroom during my first guitar lesson. And I remember I kept looking over there thinking, who is Eric Johnson? What's Guitar Player? And that was my introduction. I ran out and tried to find, this magazine. I couldn't find this exact issue, but I did find other Guitar Player magazines and started buying them. So that's awesome that I've actually tracked that down. Let's see. Frank Zappa. There's an old Jeff Beck from 73. There's Wes Montgomery from 73. Richie Blackmore. Lukather. I mean, there's some great issues here. And as you can see, these are my protected copies. So I put them in sleeves because I know my sweat and stuff's kind of corrosive, my hands. And I want to preserve these. I want to keep them nice. I don't want to destroy these like the ones that I had when I was a kid that got destroyed. There's Neil Schon, Steve Morse, there's Hendrix. That's a special issue. So definitely I've been going through this mountain of magazines and pulling out, good issues or issues that were in good condition that I liked. I definitely remember having this issue when I was a kid, and I'm glad that I had like a new copy that isn't all torn up and marked up and stuff. There's Joe Pass, Pat Martino, which is so awesome. There's Larry Carlton. A little Cheap Trick action there with Rick. And there's, Albert Lee. Oops, sorry, Albert. Hopefully it's okay. That's what the sleeves are for, though, right? And there's, Segovia. There's Leo Cocky. There's Stanley Clark. Jeff Skunk Baxter. There's Johnny Winter. There's Clapton. Oh my gosh, there's Clapton. I don't want to destroy these, like I said, and here I am destroying them. Almost there. There's Andy Summers. Peter Frampton. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Angus Young. So I'm not done, but I've definitely stopped. Like, I'm not buying any bundles or whatever now, especially now that the news has been released that Guitar Player is going to cease production of their print, version. I have a feeling these are just going to skyrocket on eBay or Reverb or wherever. So I'm so glad that I bought these gradually over the last 4 or 5 years. And like I mentioned earlier, I totally scored last month and got a huge stash. So I have a mountain of Guitar Player magazines I'm going through. I'm kind of sifting and looking through them. There's a bunch I haven't even looked at yet. And like that little hefty, storage tub I had there, I have like three big ones that are deep like this, and they're just full of Guitar Player magazines. And I'm going through them and reading the lessons, checking out the interviews. Of course, I love checking out the ads and stuff too. And there's just something about it, and maybe it's me, maybe it's my age, being raised reading magazines, and that's why I'm clicking with them so much. But I've spent a couple decades on the internet now. I guess I officially got online like around 1999 or something like that. And everybody was telling me, oh man, you don't have to get magazines anymore, you don't have to buy albums anymore, books, it's all on the internet. And yeah, there's a ton of stuff on the internet, but it's just different. Like the way the magazines were written, as far as Guitar Player magazine, the quality of the writing, there was so much care and attention to detail and heart, in every issue. When you read like letters to the editor and some of that kind of stuff, and you can tell, like the people that put the magazine together, they actually cared. It wasn't like a gig or a job they had to hurry through. You could tell they put their heart and soul in every word that they printed in the magazine. And I think that's what hits me. When I pick up a Guitar Player magazine and I start devouring and reading it, it's like fireworks go off in my brain. The internet, it doesn't really do that the same way. It's different. Sometimes I'll stumble onto something like on a website or on YouTube or whatever, and it's like, ooh, this is cool. But whenever I grab an old Guitar Player magazine, whether it's one that I've looked at before or never seen before, I guarantee it's almost like somebody hits me with a baseball bat where it's like whack, and it's like, oh my gosh, here's a great idea, just hiding in this interview with somebody, a lesson with somebody. It could just be one of those advertisements, like I said, something maybe I haven't seen before, or a player I haven't seen before, a guitar I haven't seen in a long time, or whatever. It's just printed excitement and inspiration, with every issue. So as far as these older magazines are concerned, for me, I just know a lot of these issues I've never even seen before. So even though some of these might be 30, 40, 50 years old, they are brand new to me because I've never read them before. And then the issues that I had when I was a kid, or maybe I'd seen before, when I was a kid, when I was 12 or 13 or 15 or whatever age I was, I didn't really understand like the lessons. I didn't understand some of the stuff that was being shared because it was way over my head. But now that I'm older, hopefully a little bit more experienced, now when I read a Guitar Player magazine lesson, especially back in the day, I can grab it. It's like, oh, I know what he's talking about. Oh, I've never thought of it like that before. And I'm actually using that information in those lessons in a brand new way. It's very inspiring. And a lot of this information is lost in the digital world. Yeah, there are some reprints you can find online, maybe a PDF somewhere on some shady website or whatever. But actually having the physical magazine complete, I can read it cover to cover, devour every lesson, read every interview, laugh at the ads or whatever, the poofy hair and stuff or whatever. But it's definitely, it's eye-opening, it's inspiring, and to me, completely worth whatever I paid for these magazines. Now I'm going to share some things that I actually had published in Guitar Player magazine. I'm just going to grab some licks from some of the lessons that I've had. And the first idea here, this is actually the second lesson I ever had in the magazine. This is from the November 2015 issue with Guthrie's Slippery Things. And this is a lesson, focusing on Guthrie Govan, of course. And there's the 2 pages right there. And, definitely Guthrie's been a huge inspiration on me. And before I show the lick, I wanted to mention that I read somewhere that when Guthrie Govan wanted to get the attention of Guitar Techniques magazine over in England, he wrote a lesson based around Sean Lane. He was trying to think of the hardest, most difficult thing he could, basically show them he could do. And it worked. They hired him after that. They were like, wow, boom, he got hired. So then I was submitting some things. We're doing some writing for Premier Guitar and some websites. And I really wanted to kind of find a way to get into Guitar Player. And I remember, thinking, well, what's the hardest, most difficult thing that I could write? And I knew that Guthrie already talked about Sean Lane. So my first lesson with Guitar Player was about Alan Holdsworth. It's called Hands Like Holdsworth. So just like Guthrie Govan getting into Guitar Techniques worked, trying to find the most difficult advanced thing I could think of, which was Alan Holdsworth, it helped me basically get in Guitar Player magazine. So the lick I'm sharing from Guthrie's Slippery Things is example number 2, and it's basically the slip and slide minor 9 arpeggio. It's really cool, like this. One more time. And if you look carefully, you can see we're basically just taking the same minor 9, kind of implied chord shape there, and we're just moving it up the fretboard like that, right? From there, that's like E minor 9, G minor 9, A minor 9, C minor 9, and D minor 9. But then the trick here is we're going to basically weave. We're going up to start with. And then when you get to that high F sharp, which is your 9th in E, then you're going to shift slide that into that A right there, and then come down G minor 9 like this. Right? And then when you get to that G note, you're going to shift into that A and then spell out A minor 9 right there like this. Grab that B, shift slide into that D, and then you're going to come down C minor 9 like that. And then right there, when you grab that C, shift slide that into the D minor 9, and your last note happens to be E. So you could safely play this in E minor, and you're just going to weave and kind of slip and slide your way up, and then end on that final E note. And right there I'm hybrid picking. I'm picking the lowest note and then hybrid picking the top 2, like that. And then I'm just really saving that pick note whenever it appears on the A string, like that. And you could also pick that just regular without hybrid picking, however you want to do it. But I really like that sound. It's got a cool, kind of blurry ear kind of sound, because you're hearing the top note, slid, and then when you get to that position, then the bottom note slid, and it's alternating, top, and then bottom, and then top. Intervallic, and really it's just some ear candy. The next idea I'm going to share here came from the April 2017 issue with my lesson Finger Lickin' Good, which is right here. And there's a couple pages there, and then also over there. And this is example 5 from that lesson. But Finger Lickin' Good is all about hybrid picking, which we were just doing that in the Guthrie Govan lick that I shared. And now we're going to hybrid pick some more. This is a hybrid picked E minor sequence like this. One more time. This is a really unusual way of getting around E minor right there, because I'm playing with this. We're basically grabbing E and B, and we're picking with the pick on the G, and then hybrid picking that B note on the B string. And then basically reach over here and grab G on the B string and that E up on the 12th fret on the high E, and do the same thing. Pick and then hybrid pick. And then go back to that E and B note. And then hop down here and grab this D and G and do it right there. And then go back to the E and B. And then that's B and G. And then you're grabbing G and E. And then you're going to end on E. So really slowly. Right? And that's the pattern. Right? And you're just kind of sequencing and kind of gradually making your way down just like that. And your final note's that E right there. And it's kind of an interesting, sequence. Melodically, it's interesting. It's kind of got an intervallic flavor to it. And you can definitely experiment with snapping that hybrid pick note. And kind of pick it, or snap it, a little harder. It's a really cool sequence right there, but it's not very common. Alright, the last idea I'm going to share here in this episode that I contributed to Guitar Player magazine came from the June 2017 issue with the lesson Lone Star Guitar, which was a Texas swing lesson. And this is example 5 from this lesson, which is right there. There's more over here. But this example is basically a variation of a Bob Wills and Texas Playboy song, What Steel Guitar Rag. And this is really cool, like this. One more time. So we're basically playing with these E6s, and he's doing, and you're gonna basically grab like that, and that's basically an E6 right there. Think of like a pedal steel guitar, but we're kind of mimicking or emulating that on a regular electric guitar. So that's a big stretch right there for that E6. Then we're gonna basically we're gonna play an A sharp at the bottom for that next shape. So that's an E6 sharp 11 right there. And we're moving that B to that A sharp to that A note, right? So we're just really moving down like that, right? And you're gonna end like that, right? Kind of hitting this like B13 implied, and then you're ending on an E5 right there. Really cool. And I like dipping that bar and kind of adding some vibrato. It kind of gives it like a little bit more of that pedal steel kind of flavor. That's going to wrap this episode of Brewster's Millions of Rants with this local guitar player. And obviously I'm a huge fan of the magazine, a former contributing writer of this magazine. And there's just so much history and important information that was shared in the pages of this historic magazine. That's basically the reason I've been going back and buying old issues and absorbing all this history and information. Because it's right there in the pages, this magazine that lasted for decades and decades. But like I mentioned earlier, it was kind of a gut punch when I heard the news, like, no, man, because I'm noticing all these things disappearing in the modern age. And Guitar Player Magazine is just yet another thing that's kind of altered or changed or different. So I wish them the best, as far as their website, but the fact the print issue of Guitar Player Magazine is going to be gone, that's really sad. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Nail Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.